You're listening to The Best Company Show, Southern California's business podcast, focusing on topics of interest to CEOs and managers of middle market companies, with your host, Robert J. Curtis.
And welcome to The Best Company Show. I'm your host, Robert J. Curtis, and I'm glad to be with you today with my very special guest, Ryan Fulmer of FEK Advisors. And actually, a lot of experience for as a certified public accountant for many years first, and then he has been in the operations world for a long time, for a couple of decades now, with some major institutions, including Corinthian colleges and Zenith Education. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And now he's working with private equity groups on major, acquisitions, literally hundreds of acquisitions going on over the last few years. And you're part of, some of those acquisitions and working with their team. So let's dig into it. Welcome to my show, Ryan.
Thank you for having me.
Great. And I'd love to dig in and find out a little bit more about what your background is and what are you doing now? Tell us about it.
Grew up in Silicon Valley working for technology companies. I've always worked with fast-growing companies, mainly private equity, venture capital owned. Have been the accountant advisor from the outside to CFOs, as from the CPA firm and audit perspective, as well as from controller and CFO positions.
Okay. And let's see. I mentioned earlier that you were with Corinthian Colleges for a while, Zenith Education Corp, who acquired Corinthian, right? Mm-hmm. And you were with them for quite a while, and that was operations experience, right? That you're CFO there, right?
I was the controller.
The controller, okay.
Through the process.
Controller through the process and doing all of that. And then now, latest, how big of a company and what are you talking about? Who are you dealing with?
I work for a private equity company. Is one of the big ones I'm working for right now. Is about $500 million. Has multiple locations in the United States. Lots of employees. I was brought in with a major turnover in the corporate accounting department, and with low unemployment, that's kind of happening more these days, but had to walk into a situation with effectively one staff and a few consultants that weren't, some of the consultants really weren't the right people, and my main goals were to build a team, build processes and procedures in place, and kind of get it best in class, kind of rolling as a public company.
Okay, so is this a typical of your current assignments and things you're undertaking? This kind of size of a business and type of operations and things like that? Is that where you're coming from?
Yeah, this is a smaller than some of the ones I've worked for recently, but okay. I mean, building process and procedures is what I've done my whole career, and I've never really had to come in with no transition and kind of have to build processes backwards and figure out what was done and kind of recreate the wheel, but I've done it enough from scratch and built companies from inception to a few employees up to hundreds, and with those same, when you're dealing with startups and venture capital companies, I've also helped wind those down from 100 to a few hundred employees down to zero, to where I'm the last employee.
So you've brought them up and brought them down, depending on their life cycle.
Exactly.
Where they are in the life cycle. Okay, cool. So let's talk about a couple of other things that you're involved with these days, because I want to bring those out. I want to talk about those a little bit, too. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're involved. You have reached out beyond just being the CFO, accountant, financial guy in the profit world, but you've crossed over into essentially nonprofit education, but also nonprofit foundation for medical research and things. Can you tell us about what you're doing there?
Correct. I have a son that was born with a genetic skin disorder called epidermolysis bullosa, and it's a life-limiting, devastating condition. The skin's very fragile. His skin is missing collagen 7, which is actually the anchoring fiber between the two layers of skin that hold your skin together. But we're trying to help Stanford raise money for research. They're one of the experts in the field. We were in San Jose. We felt very fortunate to have that be our doctor and close to us. And we started doing that and talked to my wife about raising money and said, I'm doing this for other companies that are making websites and news apps and everything else. Why don't we just set something up and give a little bit more structure behind what we're doing? We had some friends that wanted to help, and we kind of felt obligated to do it, so we kind of built that ourselves, started it up, found some other nonprofits and families in the United States that were doing the same thing, that had the same goal but different skills, and we actually merged with them in 2012 and I think we had $2 million of revenue that year. We've been employing the venture philanthropy agreements, so kind of taking the venture capital concept that I've seen in Silicon Valley with technology and kind of applied it to medical research. We make sure when we give a university money for that research that we obtain the rights to that research that we're paying for. So effectively, when the research gets a little more proven or starts to show that it's going to be worth something in a commercial setting, we now have companies coming up to us at this point saying we want that, and for us to give them that and assign those exclusivity rights for them to have access to that research, they need to give us things, and it also allows us to kind of be involved in the process. And I mean, we're not experts in genetics or science, but we've kind of created a backbone structure where we have a scientific advisory board reviewing stuff, and we're having fundraisers all over the United States, and we kind of created this backbone for other families to help raise money, and we're making sure that the science is going to the people that actually need it, and instead of just writing a check and getting a photo op with a big check and a smile for a press release, we're actually being involved in the research, and we get updates every 6 months, and we get to provide feedback to them on whether we think they're doing it right or not right and how to make it better. And in some cases, even we see the same application from 3 or 4 different universities. We'll get together and make them work together, and we've had a few instances where we've kind of gone back and said, you're all asking for the same thing. We need you guys to work together to do this, and we're happy to fund you. And academia doesn't like working together, but we need academia to work with industry because we need to get to market as quick as possible to help our children.
Let's dig and talk about that, because this is interesting. You dug in right away and you went into all the details about how you're running and operating the EV Research Foundation and everything else. First off, let's backtrack a little bit. How long ago did you set this up?
2011 was our first fundraiser. I incorporated in 2012.
All right, so it's only been, you know, a few years, essentially, several
over 5 years.
Yeah, and you've grown to this size where you're actually funding millions of dollars of research. And what's interesting, and which I wanted to highlight, and we'll talk about this when we come back from our break, which is, you know, you're looking at this from a very strategic way, and also looking at the bottom line, whether or not you're in the profit sector or the nonprofit sector. And that's something that I'd like to focus on. And also what I'd love to find out about is how do you do this, and what's the secret for managing that, you know, first off, coming into something you mentioned early on, which was we talked about the fact that you're involved with these private equity firms and doing work with them, and they're acquiring literally tens or hundreds of entities, and having to, you know, structure operations and get the financials done and do all of the things you do on a big scale, and deliver on that, and also how you get your people motivated and how you manage those people to make sure that you're getting that done. So why don't we do this? Why don't we take a quick break for a few minutes, or for a few seconds actually, for a word from our sponsor, which is Alpha Quantix, my company. And when we come back, I'd love to kind of dig into this, and let's talk about some of the issues you have and how you do this, how you make such a success out of not only the private equity firms you're dealing with, but the nonprofits that you've started and that you've been, you know, operations involved in operations. Is great. It's fascinating. We'll be right back.
Perfect.
Robert J. Curtis is the founder and CEO of Alpha Quantix, a premier provider of employee analytics and metrics that helps CEOs and managers of middle market companies hire the best, manage the best, and be the best. Robert is a keynote speaker, presenter, moderator, and panel member who regularly appears at conferences, business events, and association meetings nationwide. His presentations provide powerful information that give CEOs and managers of middle market companies valuable insights to improve their hiring and engagement skills. If you'd like Robert to make a personal appearance, he can be contacted by visiting his show's website, bestcompanyshow.com, or by emailing Robert at info@bestcompanyshow.com.
And welcome back to the Best Company Show. I'm your host, Robert J. Curtis, and we're glad to have you here listening to us. I have a special guest with me, Ryan Fulmer of FEK Advisors, and he's doing some great work with over the years and also currently with major educational institutions, with private equity firms, and also with nonprofits, and all in essentially the financial and operations sphere. And so welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay, great. And what I'd love to talk about, Ryan, real quick, if we have a little bit of time, is, your knowledge and experience when it comes to the operation sides of things, okay? And because operations are so key to any enterprise, and so key, it seems like, to the things you've been doing with, again, the major educational institutions like Zenith Education, Corinthian colleges, with private equity that you've been involved with and you're involved with currently, and also with your nonprofit, which is EB Research, right? All of those require a lot of skill and knowledge to execute, and you've got to run into issues when you're dealing with these people, and when you're setting up new organizations, when you're expanding or changing, or winding them up, winding them down, things like that. Can you tell me about it? Tell me about what the problems you encounter.
Well, every company is different, but you really have to break things down and understand the process and not be scared to say, I don't understand, tell me how that's happening. One of the things I like about being an accountant in the finance world is it's about money. So you're effectively following the money.
Okay, but tell me about the issues. Tell me. Okay, I get that it's about the idea of digging in and unwinding things, deconstructing things, and reconstructing things. That I get that. But let's talk about the issues that drive this, or the issues that you encounter in the process. What are the things that you see on the financial side and the accounting side? Turnover problems, accuracy problems, finding the right people, personality issues, things like that. What do you encounter in your business? Everything, right?
Yeah, no, all of those. So, and it is following the money, but again, all the tasks, everyone thinks an accountant is an accountant, but even in corporate accounting, the tasks and roles are very different. You're not looking for one type of person for every task. So you really need to understand what needs to get done and what kind of person you need to get those tasks done. You are managing a team, you're managing people, but you're also managing a process and managing money as it flows through multiple systems in a company.
So what kind of problems does that lead to? For example, you have the right people in the wrong place. Can you give me examples of situations that have unfolded where you've realized, hey, wait a second, this is not working out for one reason or another, or where things have just not happened the way you were expecting?
A detailed example.
Or is it just so many that you can't pull one out?
Yeah, no, my current situations, it's like, what's the most urgent problem? And we're just knocking stuff out one after another. But it's literally digging into pretty much, effectively every line item of the financial statement, saying what drives this number, and is it the number of offices, or the number of employees, and kind of building a process around that to make sure you're doing the proper record keeping and being able to get that information in the system timely so you can provide the stuff to management and they can actually make a decision. When I came in there, they weren't reporting numbers. I think I started in June and we were still trying to close April. And we weren't able to give management data on April. And at this point, we're now we're working on closing up August right now.
Okay, so let's talk about that, for example. Is the source of that kind of problem, or the problem itself is you're not getting the data, but you're not getting it from where? From the field, from the region, the little offices that are part of the entity? How does that work?
So the problem they're dealing with here that I've seen multiple times is when you grow from multiple acquisitions, you're dealing with multiple systems.
Right.
So they had, let's say, 20 different companies on 20 different ERP systems last year, and we went through and had to integrate that into one system, and kind of herding all of the different people and training of them, getting them all on a system and a consistent chart of accounts, and understanding how everyone's numbers roll up into the final numbers is not an easy task.
Okay, so ERP is, let me get back at ERP.
A reporting system. Enterprise reporting system.
Right, yeah, okay. And so what you're saying is that when you're dealing with some of these entities you come into and you step into and you're taking over, on the financial side, it's lack of planning that's come into it, or is it the implementation that they've just decided on their own that they're going to do things differently in different locations, or what is it?
It's growing. It's just growing pains. When you're growing too fast, you only have so much time to do the certain things. Like I said, you're dealing with the most urgent matters, and getting everyone on the same accounting system isn't always the most urgent matters.
Okay.
When you have a company that is fully staffed and is kind of steady state and kind of fully staffed up, it's easy to absorb an acquisition in a month after it happens and kind of just take over and it's done, it's there, no one's ever looking back, it's no big deal.
Right.
But when you're starting at smaller private equity companies that start really small and just start adding other companies, even at Corinthians, I mean, if you could acquire, when Corinthians sold its largest asset group after its demise, I mean, we ended up getting acquired by a company that had a third of the employees that we had. So you had an acquirer that bought someone 3 times its size, like a minnow swallowing a whale type of thing, and they had to integrate us, and we helped with that integration.
Okay, so let's talk about that. How do you deal with that? As a manager, as an operations-oriented financial guy, how do you manage it? How do you manage into that?
I mean, you break it down in a process. I mean, smaller companies have more generalists, more one department, that people that are kind of doing multiple hats, versus billion-dollar public companies may have a treasury department, an AR department, a tax department, AP department, and each department could have 10 people, it could have 50 people, depending on the volume going through it.
So if you're breaking it down, you're making people responsible for what they're doing?
You're turning one team into 10 teams.
Oh, interesting. Okay, and so how do you do that without, people just kind of taking off with it and, bunch of cats, like herding cats kind of thing? How do you deal with that? I mean, is it a situation where you have an idea or a structure, an idea to implement these kind of things?
It depends on the type of business, but ultimately, like I said, you're looking at the volumes coming through each department, and you got to figure out which departments need to kind of have their own leader and someone that can actually own that department and those processes.
Okay, but if someone's going to own that department, how are you setting them up for it? You're just assigning them tasks and letting them do it, or are you involved in the process? Or are you giving them authority, or how does that work?
You're involved in the process, but you also have to trust your people, and you have to hire subject matter experts, and you have to hire people that have done this before and understand those processes. I mean, I've worked in accounts payable and accounts receivable and fixed assets and corporate accounting and technical accounting and reporting, but there's people out there younger than me,
so basically what you're
that can do a better job.
What you're saying is that you're looking for people that you can actually delegate to, right?
Exactly.
That you can delegate authority rather than keeping it all under yourself or under the generalist. Is
Correct.
That kind of okay?
Yeah. No, if you're delegating tasks, I mean, there's only so much time in the world to get everything done, and when you're at a higher level, there's too much stuff going on in the company. You really need to delegate the responsibility of the different departments to those people and make sure they have ownership and the ability to make decisions, but that you're a part of that collaboration and those ideas, because, I mean, like I said, it's growing and it's always building, which means you always have to go back and you're dealing with resources, whether it's money or people's time.
I really like that. I like the fact that you're talking about the delegation, because delegation is so important to management, and proper delegation and doing it. So it sounds like you're pretty successful at doing that. The entities you've been in, the growth, and let's talk about EB Research, for example. And in that scenario, as opposed to what you've been talking about with the private equity and the profit-making ventures, in the EB Research, if I recall correctly, you mentioned that you merged with another entity, and
Correct.
so there must have been some kind of way that you managed that. Can you talk about that? Delegating or assigning, making sure that things were getting done?
Yeah, well, I mean, when we looked at the two organizations, there was no accountant on their side. There was no attorney on our side. We had good social media and PR presence. They were paying a firm for that. They had some very high net worth individuals and donors on their side. We did not have that on our side. So we always like to say, when we were talking about a merger, and it fits so well when you took the two teams together and kind of said, this organization has an awesome CEO and chairman. We think you should be the CEO and chairman of the whole organization. We have an awesome fundraiser and social media. We want to take that person and make them be vice chair and have them be in charge of that. We have a scientist, you have an attorney, and we always say 1 + 1 = 3 in that case. It wasn't just 1 + 1 = 2. Together we were more than we could have done separately.
And part of that, okay, so getting into the operations side of things and the operations management side of things, part of that was that you had the people, you'd identified the right people, you knew that they could fulfill those functions and perform those duties, and you could delegate, you could effectively, release control and responsibility for, those functions, and then maybe retain some ownership over things, but you were able to release it enough because you had the right people.
Yeah,
so
and that one's not even retain ownership. I mean, we really had rock stars in each of their fields, and once we were part of the team, I mean, it's really everyone just kind of helped with theirs. And I mean, when you deal in something with a nonprofit and a higher power, it's awesome because everyone's behind it because either they have a child with the thing or they know someone with it and they really want to help. Versus when we're talking about companies, you have to pay big money for those kind of expertise.
Right.
But with a nonprofit, you have people that want to build relationships. You have people that want to do good. You have people that want to be in charge. You have people that want, some people that just want to know what's going on, and you allow those people to have what they want, and at the same time, they're helping part of this amazing team that hopefully can cure all genetic disorders in the next 5 years.
That would be wonderful. As a matter of fact, on that note, what I want to do is take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to dig into something that really, I think, dovetails with what we've been talking about here. I'm going to give you the hot seat question, but my hot seat question today, I'll give you a little clue in advance. It has to do with kind of the differences between nonprofit and profit ventures, and also, the financial aspects and the operational aspects of those two entities, which you cross over into both those worlds, and you're simultaneously working in both those worlds. And so I love it. I want to find out your take on some current issues that are in the news about those things. Okay, awesome. So let's take a quick break.
Robert J. Curtis is the founder and CEO of Alpha Quantix, a premier provider of employee analytics and metrics that helps CEOs and managers of middle market companies hire the best, manage the best, and be the best. Robert is a keynote speaker, presenter, moderator, and panel member who regularly appears at conferences, business events, and association meetings nationwide. His presentations provide powerful information that gives CEOs and managers of middle market companies valuable insights to improve their hiring and engagement skills. If you'd like Robert to make a personal appearance, he can be contacted by visiting his show's website, bestcompanyshow.com, or by emailing Robert at info@bestcompanyshow.com.
And welcome back to the Best Company Show. And I have with me today's guest, Ryan Fulmer of FEK Advisors. And we've been talking about various issues in the financial world. He's a CPA and a CFO and financial advisor and to nonprofits and profit-making ventures. As a matter of fact, Ryan, if we could, I want to reach out to the audience and let them know how to reach me, but also how to reach you. So first, how to reach me at bestcompanyshow.com. You can find all of our episodes posted up there. Also on iTunes and Stitcher. And YouTube videos channel coming and episodes coming there. And what else? Oh, and if you want to reach out to me individually or personally, go to LinkedIn. That's a great place to reach me. Yes. Robert J. Curtis. Don't forget the J. It's a way to distinguish me from all the other Robert Curtises out there. How about you, Ryan? How would people interested in reaching out to you and finding out about EB research, about your financial advising, your CFO operations experience, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, you can reach me at ryan@fekadvisors.com. If you want to learn more about EB research, we also have a good Facebook page. We have an event coming up on October 6th in Long Beach if you guys are interested in going to that. And then LinkedIn, of course, also. So Ryan Fulmer, last name Fullmer.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's dig in. We're here for the last segment of the show here, which is the hot seat question. Okay, Ryan?
Awesome.
Here's what I want to ask you about. I saw an article just in the last couple of days in MarketWatch, I believe, and they were talking about the fact that a new study came out that shows that in the educational environment, when private equity firms actually buy up educational institutions, trade schools, things like that, what happens is the students end up paying a lot more money to go to school there, and rather than when they're in the nonprofit or non-private equity arena. So I need you to do some justification here. What is going on there? It doesn't sound good for the students. Doesn't sound good for the government, who's funding a lot of those loans that the students are taking out. Tell me what's going on there. I want your take on it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've spent many nights and hours discussing this exact topic, and I've
really?
Obviously been on both sides. I mean, I was in the for-profit for a couple of years, and I could see that perspective. And then after we were sold, we went to the nonprofit, and I was owned by them for a couple of years. So I definitely get both sides of the argument. I mean, I think that article was written by Captain Obvious. Like, I think that's a no-brainer. Private equity are in it for the money, and that's kind of the overall debate in the education industry is, I mean, for-profits, they have a mission, and their overall mission is, increasing stockholder value, and that's what it has to be. I mean, that people are investing in that company.
It has to be from the private equity side, from the owner of the business side,
yes,
as a profit-making venture. But I mean, what the article is saying in its essence is, and what the argument I think of the author is that it's not about it shouldn't be all of it be about money. It's about giving students an opportunity to get an education. It's also about maybe minimizing the cost to our government and the students for student loans and things like that. So there's that's the
and there's a theological break. And I mean, this is the exact same conversation people have about medical and healthcare
exactly
at the same time. But I mean, from the for-profit, I mean, the argument is they can be more efficient, they have more professional management, they know what they're doing. For the education industry, for-profit has a very different set of rules than the nonprofit has with gainful employment and 90/10 and some of those, I think they're calling them legacy rules now that the Department of Education actually debating, but there are certain metrics that for-profits have to abide by that the nonprofits don't have to right now, which actually makes it more expensive to run those companies.
And the nonprofit actually, as a result, the nonprofit the profit-making entity, the private equity-owned enterprise school, has additional expenses or additional requirements that cost them more? Is that what you're saying?
Definitely. Yeah, okay. In the administration as well as internal audit and compliance, and there's a lot more scrutiny has looked on that. So, I mean, so when you're looking at nonprofits versus for-profits, I mean, on any industry, I guess. I mean, there's, like I said, there's the mission, and the mission for a nonprofit. I mean, their number one mission for education can be increasing student outcome, helping students get good jobs. That's actually what they're looking to do, and they can lose some money doing that. The different sets of rules helps the nonprofits. They have compliance issues with the attorney generals and stuff, but I mean, education specifically, for-profit has very strenuous rules that the for-profit have been trying to get changed for years. And then there's the third one that people always forget about is nonprofits have endowments, and they have other ways and money is coming in to help the students to be able to reduce the tuition. No one's going to give a VC-backed education company $100 million to give students scholarships, but some of the nonprofits will get that because their major mission is to help the students, and when philanthropists are looking to give money, that's really what they're giving money to, is that mission. They don't want to give the mission to increasing venture capital's value or increasing shareholders' value of a public company.
Okay, so let me play devil's advocate here for a minute. Okay, wouldn't it be better off then that if all educational institutions were nonprofit? If we were in an environment where it was cheaper for the students and people were more inclined to willingly give donations? Or is there a benefit to having the profit-seeking, profit-motivated educational? Are there things that they're doing that the nonprofits aren't doing?
They're filling in gaps for certain types of students. I mean, one of the arguments always for profit is most of their students are the ones that default on student loans. But then on the other side of that, you're looking at the for-profits. It's really a lot of online schools. You're looking at single parents, lower income. That's hard for them to get to school. I mean, online classes aren't easy. I've tried to take some myself. I mean, it's just the students you're going after that some would argue need the most help, obviously are going to have a higher drop rate. And when you have a higher drop rate, you have the default rate. But I mean, from my experiences and I'm not that old, but under the notches of my belt, it's hard to say that there's any one right choice for anything. There has to be room for both.
Okay. So I mean, I get it. I understand that the profit-oriented, the private equity-owned, for example, schools are actually opening up doors that to students that might not otherwise exist.
Yes.
With the nonprofits, because the nonprofits have a different focus.
And I think it's just changing, but historically there really haven't been that many nonprofit career-based education. Most of the nonprofit education you'd think of as the normal 4-year universities. And when you're talking about the certain demographic students, they can't go to school every day for 4 years to work through that degree that could cost $100,000 to $250,000 these days, versus someone who can get into I guess Grand Canyon even just recently turned nonprofit, but you can get into one of their programs for nursing or
trade schools. Things
and you can get in and out of a program in 9 months, sometimes a year, sometimes 2 years, and you can get right into the workworkforce and start making money.
And you get a marketable skill, and you get something out there, and it's
and that is where it's going, I think. But
really, and is it going more toward the profit or the nonprofit side of things? As far as the ownership and the structure, I mean, I'm just asking you for generalization. You might not know.
Well, I think as the millennials are looking for work and looking at what they want to do, I think it's more of going to turn into a career-based education.
Okay, interesting. Rather than the higher education kind of focus on things, it's more focused on actual skills and occupations.
Yeah,
right?
versus like my generation, which was pretty much like you go to high school, then you go to college, and that's just what you do. And then, I mean, even I went to accounting, and then it's like, well, no, then you go to the Big Four and you work for this many years. And it's like, well, when does my education stop? When do I get to start doing what I want to do, right?
All right, good. Well, okay, so with that in mind, I'll wrap it up here. And I love your response. I thought it was great. It ties in the two spheres that you deal in on a regular basis, and it was great to get your input on those. And it'll be interesting to see how things evolve in those fields and how you participate in all of that. Thank you very much to everybody for listening and watching. It's been great. Great having you here. And I want to thank again Ryan Fulmer, my special guest here. He's been awesome. I love hearing about your world and the worlds that you deal in. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Great. And I want to thank Paul Ryan, the engineer. Sorry, Paul Ryan. Paul Roberts, the engineer, for putting this show together and helping us put it on the air every week. And also to Roland Canamar of Silver Dream Factory, who produces and helps out in a lot of other ways behind the scenes for the show. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching and listening to our show. We'll see you soon.
You've been listening to The Best Company Show, Southern California's business podcast, focusing on topics of interest to CEOs and managers of middle market companies, with your host, Robert J. Curtis. Robert J. Curtis is the founder and CEO of Alpha Quantix, a premier provider of employee analytics and metrics that helps CEOs and managers of middle market companies hire the best, manage the best, and be the best. Robert is a keynote speaker, presenter, moderator, and panel member who regularly appears at conferences, business events, and association meetings nationwide. His presentations provide powerful information that give CEOs and managers of middle market companies valuable insights to improve their hiring and engagement skills. If you'd like Robert to make a personal appearance, he can be contacted by visiting his show's website, bestcompanyshow.com, or by emailing Robert at info@bestcompanyshow.com.
I'm Josh Seibert with Sandler